Hello everyone, welcome back to Pro Evo 2020. This is not a Toon Revival video, but it does come off of a question, a suggestion if you will, from one of the viewers who asked if I could go a little bit more in depth with the youth team, regens, training, that kind of stuff. And do you know what? That's actually a really good idea, so that's what we're going to be doing in this video. At the moment, you're seeing my personal private save. I've literally only just started it, but I thought that it would be a good way to show you what you get when you first come into the game, before you get regens, before any of that happens. So you just go into team management, negotiations, and you can access your youth team from there. This is exactly how it will appear to you the first time that you enter into it. What I like to do is just hit the square button and change the sorting option to overall rating, descending order, and that just means that you get the best players at the very top of your list at the very start, and you don't have to, at this stage, waste your time with players that are rated at 51s, 53s, 54s. I'm sure that they'll turn into decent pros near the end of their career with the right training, but especially when you're playing a game with a team in the lower leagues like Lorient, where we're looking to get promoted in our first season, we really don't have time to be developing players that aren't good enough for our first team right now. At the top end, you'll see that we've got Harrington here. This is an English kind of central midfielder, utility player. He can play up front as well. He can play on the right wing. Um, Reasonable speed, pretty decent passing, and he's not terrible defensively, but his main attributes are that he's quick, he can pass the ball. So that's something that we'll have to bear in mind when we go into the training, because really you want to accentuate the positives of players and try to hide their negatives as best as you can. So anyway, what do we do with these youth players? How can we utilize them? Well, obviously the first thing you can do is you can bring them up to your main squad. So just select the player using the X button, and you've got the option to sign right there. You can also add them to your short list, your list of listed players. But with the youth team players, I don't really see the point of that, except for if you want to compare a player in your youth team to a player from outside of the club that you're looking to bring in, and then you can decide whether it's worth paying that premium for a player outside of your club, or whether it's actually worth just bringing someone through and developing them. And obviously, the benefits of doing that are that you're not spending a transfer fee, so you're saving money there. And as you can see, Lorient only have 3.7 million in the bank. We're a very small club. We're not going to be able to afford many players in unless we sell some players first. And also, the wages of a player that you bring in from the youth team tend to be a lot lower than the wages of a player that you sign from on an opposing team. So those are definitely the advantages of bringing a player in from the youth ranks. You can also place a player on the loan list. Now, this is something that I was not familiar with. I took a break from Pro Evo in 2019, and this wasn't an option that was in PES 2018. So this may be a feature which was brought in last year. This may be a brand new feature. I'm not 100% sure, but I've used it a couple of times more recently, and I have to say I absolutely adore it. It's fantastic. Essentially, you can put a player on your loan list like that, and they will sit in your youth team. If a team come in with a bid for that player before you send him out on loan, you sign him up to a contract with your own club, which means that he goes out and gets a year of experience, and then when he comes back, he becomes part of your first team. It's a brilliant way of making sure that you don't expand your first team squad too much, but at the same time, you're not losing out on these players of immense quality. So that's definitely an option that you want to take up, is putting these players on a loan list. Okay, and now we've moved on something like a week and a half in-game time. We've not played any games. Literally everything that I did, you saw in the video before this. And now, if we go into youth team, which did have a red bell on it, you'll notice that we have a loan offer from DC United for Harrington. And here's the great thing about loaning players, which I didn't mention before, but I absolutely should have. This is a 69 rated player, and DC United are willing to pay us £1.2 million to loan him for the year. He will have a salary of 3,420, which we will have to pay. But if you look at the advantages of loaning these players out, it just stacks up to a really good deal all round. And this only gets better when you get the regens coming through. I will show you some of those later when we flip over to the Toon Revival save. But for now, that's pretty much everything as far as youth team players and loaning them out is concerned. I believe players will stay in your youth team for 2 years from the point they join, regardless of age. Regens tend to join at 16, so you've got until they're 18. But the players that are in your youth team at the beginning of the game, you've got 2 years, regardless of their age. So as you see there, Harrington, 20 years old, so he will stay with you until he's 22. So if you really want him, if you don't want to lose out, make sure you sign him, because after that point they do become free agents. If you find a player that you like, either sign them up and put them in your first team, or loan them out. Get those players loaned out, get them earning you money, and get them earning experience. As it is, Harrington is a very good player, even rated at 69. He's a player that might be able to add something to the team, but we are hurting badly for money. We need the funds so that we can invest in other areas. So that is definitely going to be a loan that we make happen. So let's just click on him there, and you can accept terms, you can renegotiate, you can end negotiations, and at this point you can still sign him to your first team. So it's entirely up to you at this point what you do. If you change your mind, it's very easy just to remove him from the loan list. You just click on remove from loan list, and obviously you'd have to end negotiations. But yeah, so it's a very fluid system. It works pretty well. As it is, I feel like we could probably squeeze a little bit more capital out of DC United. I'm going to put it up to 1.5. And we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, so that is that's the youth team. That's the loan system. Next, we're going to crack on with showing you how to train the guys. Okay, so we're back on the home page, and I just thought it'd be a good idea. You guys know your way around Pro Evo. I don't need to baby you, but I'm sure there's at least one person watching this who is brand new to the Pro Evo game series and probably would appreciate being shown how to access these features. So in order to access training, you just need to go into team management again, and there is actually 2 different options for training. You can go into regular training, where you can access the training for your first team players. Youth team training works in exactly the same way. So when I show you youth team training, just bear in mind that if you want to apply this to regular training with your players, you absolutely can do. So go into edit youth training, and now we have all of the players available to us. Now, it's well worth with any player that is set to balanced training. Although balanced training is perfectly okay, and you will see a decent rise in their stats across their play, it's worth going in and just having a look at the different types of player that you can make these players. Not only does it give you enhanced training in certain areas, but it will also eventually make the player into the kind of player that shows on the training settings. So if I wanted to turn, let's have another look at his position. So Harrington, again, we established earlier, as I mentioned, he's pretty quick. He's got decent passing. He plays as a slightly advanced central midfielder, not quite an attacking midfielder, but he does play in that advanced central midfielder role. So he could be dovetailed into an attacking midfielder, kind of like a Mesut Ozil type character, but hopefully someone that maybe trains a bit harder. But that's my bias being thrown in there. I do actually think he's a good player. So we've got all of these options available to us. Some of these training options are not available because he doesn't play in that position. That can be remedied with all players by playing a player out of position. Eventually, they will become familiar with that role, and these training options will open. So if I played him on the right-hand side, in a more advanced role, in like a left wing forward, right wing forward kind of position, then eventually prolific winger would open up to us. That being said, I'm going to concentrate on the roles that are available to us here. Balanced, we've already established we're not going to be going with balance. Now, he's good with ball control and tight possession, and we've established his passing is not bad. He's rated 71 in low pass and 71 in lofted pass as well. Also, looking on the right-hand side, although he is not defensively aware, he is very good at ball winning and he has a decent amount of aggression on him. So he would make a pretty decent box-to-box midfielder. He might not sense danger, but I'm sure that he would be more than capable of winning the box and bringing it forward. However, there are other options available to us. Because he can play up front, we could play him as a goal poacher. But looking at where the training would be concentrated, it doesn't really work well with what his strengths are already. Yes, it does increase his speed. It gives a massive boost to his acceleration, but his finishing is only 66, and 2 training stars are not going to get that up nearly enough. He, in my mind, is more of a creator than he is a finisher. So we need to look at what we can do to make him into a more well-rounded player, while at the same time trying to accentuate the positives. Now, my eye is drawn to Orchestrator at the bottom here, and I'll tell you why. It gives him extra training in defensive awareness, which he does need work on. It also helps him improve his ball winning, which is already very good. His ball control, his dribbling, they both get a boost. He's already very good in tight possession, and I think he will naturally increase in that over time. So we don't necessarily need to give him a boost there. I mean, we don't really need to give him a boost with ball control, but it's nice to give him that. His low pass and his lofted pass, pardon me. Very importantly, they get 2 arrows each, so he will continue to improve in his passing, more so than he would do with a balanced regime. Heading as a central midfielder, relatively important for a tall player, but I don't know how tall he is, so we'll have to go back and have a quick look at that. But he will continue to train on his heading. His speed and his acceleration, he will continue to train at, but at no greater level than balanced, but they're already pretty decent. His kicking power is going to be worked on. Ideally, you'd want him to maybe work a little bit harder on that, but there are other options if we need them. Physical contact, he's not very good at, and this training regime will improve that. Balance, again, that will get a look at. Defensive awareness, etc., etc. His weak foot accuracy, which is already very good, and this is something that I should mention. PES uses a color coding scheme. So if something is very bad, it is red. It's a hot color. And the better it is, the cooler the color. So it will go red, orange, then it will go green, then it will go that light blue color that you see on the right hand side. So if the numbers don't necessarily make sense to you, then you can always look at the color to give you an idea of what they're good at and what they're not. So we can see his form is decent. He's not going to suffer too badly from having red arrows and things like that. But what's very interesting to look at, and for an orchestrator is quite important actually, is both his weak foot usage, which is a 4, which is very good, and weak foot accuracy, which is at the moment a 4 as well, but could improve. He's also pretty injury resistant, which is great to see, because you don't want a young player who's constantly injured, because game time will be important to them. Another reason why we're loaning him out. So Orchestrator, definitely an option for us. He's not a destroyer. I don't think he's a destroyer. We could turn him with patience into a destroyer, but it's important to remember he's 20 years old. He's not got as long as a career as some other players that will have come through the youth team. Box to box, this is one that I highlighted before. You see, again, it concentrates on low passing and lofted passing. It also gives some increase to speed, physical contact, balance. Stamina gets a massive, massive boost, and that's quite important when a player has stamina as low as that. I think stamina, again, is a stat which will naturally increase as a player gets playing time. So it's not the worst thing in the world if you haven't got a big boost on it, but it's definitely something that's going to help him. So that is an option. He could be a decent hole player. He doesn't need pace, but it does give a massive increase to pace and acceleration. It really concentrates on ball control, ball-based stats. So playing the ball rather than the athletic side of the game. Classic number 10. He hasn't really got the finishing to play as a number 10. I don't think we'd be playing him as that. We're going to be playing him centrally. So, excuse me, the cat just crossed over my chest for no good reason. She's being a little cow today. Classic number 10. Again, like, this will give you a player who is more inclined to attack, to get into that final third and try and score goals. Harrington, not really a player that can do that. Cross specialist plays wide. I don't think we're going to be playing Harrington out wide too much, so we can ignore that. Roaming flank, again, a player that likes to get out wide and put the ball in the box. Now, creative playmaker could be the one for us. Looking at the stats, it dovetails very nicely. It works on his offensive awareness, it works on his passing, it works on his possession. It does give a little boost to finishing. It also works on stamina, balance, physical contact, and it does give a little boost to ball winning. So creative playmaker could absolutely be the role for him. I like it more than I do orchestrator, honestly. Target man, he's not a target man. He's not a fox in the box. Could be a dummy runner. Could be a dummy runner. He's not a goal poacher. So now that I've bored you to tears with my explanations of all those roles, I think we might make him a creative playmaker. Now, you can go through and you can turn the rest of these players from balanced to whatever you think benefits them. I'll give you an example here. We want someone with good shooting. Okay. Right. So, Viner, the Welsh Youth International, 19 years old. He's strong, he's quick, and he's got good shooting. He would make a superb target man. So we'll go into here, we'll track down to target man. And looking at the stats, that would actually be pretty decent for him. So we'll turn him into a target man. And you do that with the rest of your team. You can also do this with your main team, with your first team if you want. You just go into training. PES, well, the first time that you come in here, will give you a little bit of training. And you can go through again, you can change all of these players into whatever kind of player they want to be. Lemoine, I am very familiar with. He is a fantastic defensive midfielder for this team. So I'm just going to immediately turn him into a destroyer because I know that that's the kind of position that I'll be playing him in. But you do that with the rest of your players. Make sure that you don't leave them unbalanced unless you really have no idea. At the end of the day, balanced is better than no training at all. But I feel like you might as well use the training to the best of your advantage. So, don't ignore it. Whatever you do, do not ignore it. Okay, and welcome back to the revival. Now, this is the youth team as it stands for Newcastle United. Now, there are some unknowns that I can't tell you. This is going to be something that you'll need to experience for yourself. But essentially, what happens with the youth team after the first season is instead of getting youth team players in that you've never heard of, you will start getting regens. So just looking down the list, Catamol is a player that we have received this year. I'm looking for a slightly older player that's been here for a couple of years because all of these ones are 16, 17. Okay, here we go. Right, so Tom Heaton was one that we received last year. It was the first intake of youth players, and he's a decent keeper. Like if you remember the keepers that we have in the team at the moment, we've got Schubert and we've got oh God, Dubravka. There we go. Apologies to Martin Dubravka, our first choice keeper. Uh, but yeah, so he's actually on par with them at the moment. He's only 17 years old. So you can see that it's definitely the case that your youth team prospects will improve as time goes on. But if you scroll down the list, you'll also see that we've got Baldock, Craig Gardner, Lee Catamol, Luke Ayling. These players are retired players who were never going to be world beaters. And you can see that when they come back into the team, some of them have worse ratings than. I mean, Stephen Jovetic, here's a great example. Harrington is rated at 69 when you start the game. Jovetic, as a youngster, even though he's 16 years old, so he has 4 years to get better, is rated at 68. Billy Sharp, 67. Who would have thought that Billy Sharp would only be rated one less than Jovetic at this age? But it's how you develop the players. It's all about that. So, a brief overview of regens and how they work. As I said, at the end of every season, a number of players will retire. When you're playing Master League, you will find that you will have a game against a team called Old Boys. Some of those players, in fact, all of the players in the Old Boys, are players that are retiring at the end of the season. If you're lucky, some of those players may even end up in your youth team the very next season. We are going to release Shawcross immediately because I hate that guy. Except that we can't release him. So we'll place him on the loan list and get him out of this club. Make some money off of the fucker. So yes, these players will come into your team 16 years old. They'll be fresh-faced. They'll look exactly like they do in the game. So you'll have a 16-year-old that looks like he's 35. But that's how it is. Now, my personal feeling on it, while I don't mind regens at all, I would love for there to be an option at the beginning of the game where you can say you do or you don't want regens. Now, I'm not saying that they need to throw all of this data away. What they could do very easily is they could, well, I say very easily, I'm not a game designer, I'm not a developer, but think about how Football Manager does it, where players retire and every year youth team players come in. Now, if they could just put together some sort of randomizer which could take the stats of retired players, dial them back to the 16-year-old versions, and then apply a random face and random name, and maybe even change the nationality of the player, that would just make the game so much more replayable in terms of the number of years you could play this game. Because as much as I like having the regens available and being able to sign a 16-year-old Jermaine Defoe, or a Ryan Babel, or a Wan Fran, or a Mandanda, and know that they're going to turn into the players, as long as I train them correctly, that they are in real life, it kind of takes some of the fun out of it. That being said, I'm not going to turn down great players for my club that are going to cost me $5.5 grand a week, and or already worth 24, 26, 27 million pounds. Like, I'm not going to turn that shit down. It's just not going to happen. So my advice for anyone playing Pro Evo, even if you don't have the room in your squad, it is worth looking at maybe making the room. A little proviso where it comes to loaning out players, you need to have room in your squad to have them registered. There is a maximum number of players that you can have on your team, and if you exceed that, you won't be able to sign these players to loan them out. So make sure that you keep room. I like to have a small squad anyway. I prefer, if at all possible, to have a squad that means I only have 1 or 2 players left out of the matchday squad overall. So we're talking like 7 on the bench plus 11 on the pitch. That's 18. I like to play with a squad around 22 players, 22, 23. So that way I can have, it's basically like the World Cup squad kind of thing, where you have 2 players for every position and maybe an extra goalkeeper. Utility players become very important, and it's definitely worth looking for utility players. But as far as this is concerned, yeah, that's how it works. So a player will come in at 16 years old. I believe the maximum that any player can stay in the youth team is 2 years. So you've got 2 years to make your mind up. But be careful. As I said before, if you've got a player that you've got your eye on, it's much better to sign them up and loan them out for 2 years than to just let them sit in the youth team just developing. They will develop, don't get me wrong. Players will develop in the youth team at a decent rate, but they'll develop just as well if they're out playing for another team and you've got the safety net of knowing that they are your player at the end of the day. And if they do really well and someone comes in for them, you could make £25 million off the back of 15 grand a week. Or yeah. So there you go. There's the options for you. That is regens. So yeah, some like them, some don't like them. I think that Konami could be missing a trick by not giving us the option of turning them on and off. I'm not saying get rid of regens at all. I do like the idea of being able to sign these players, but I would much prefer to have the option where rather than being regens, they're almost like new gens. If anyone's familiar with Football Manager and the parlance of that, so there we go. That is your regens for you. So today we've covered youth team, we've covered youth team training, and I've tried my best to model through regens. Bear in mind, not every player that you get in your regens is going to be every regen player. There are going to be some. If we go into advanced search, we can search for 16-year-olds to 18-year-olds. And we can put in special search, free agent, and we will bring up a whole list of players. PES, Svensson, Lichtsteiner, lots of players that are regens but don't appear in my youth team. Now, this is something that I'm not sure about because so far I'm only on my first playthrough of Master League, so I don't know. Does your position in the league, where you finish, affect the standard of regens that you get? That is a question that I can't answer at the moment, but I'd love to hear you guys. Let's go back into our youth team so you can see. This is the beginning of our third season, I believe. So I've actually filmed a little bit ahead, so I'm trying very, very hard not to spoil things for you. But you can see up there the date is the 21st of August 2021. So it's the beginning of our third season in the Premier League with Newcastle. So you guys, let me know at the beginning of your third season, if you're in a different country, maybe you finished at a different point than third in the Premier League. Let me know whether this is the youth team that you got. There are a couple of players that are missing. I will throw that out there now. The reason for that is that I have signed a couple of regens, and in the fullness of time, you will see who those players are. But until then, that's going to do us for another video. Thank you very much for watching. I hope that this answered some questions. If there are any other questions that I have completely forgotten to cover, feel free, as always, to hit me up in the comments. It works. Simon can absolutely tell you that this works. If you've got a question, if you've got an idea for a video you want me to do, if you've got I might even do a Q&A video at some point where I'll just address a bunch of questions if there's enough of them to make a video out of. But, it just goes to show that you guys have some brilliant ideas that I wouldn't have even thought of. So if you want me to do something, if you want a video on a particular topic, hit me up. I'll do my best to answer questions. I'll do my best to make intelligible videos for you guys. But until next time, take care. Bye-bye.